Yo, welcome back to Minecraft with Justin and Ulan. Well, I say welcome back. This is technically not, clearly, the map that we are normally on. This is a testing flat world that I created in order to get some building ideas going. Uh, all of these are going to be based on the actual Mojang designed structures for this village type. Although, if you go to the Minecraft wiki and look up how these designs look yourself, you're going to notice that in pretty much every single case, I have made alterations. So, today's episode is primarily going to be focused on going over some of what I've been able to design, discover based on working with all these designs. So the first thing up is this animal pen, which is labeled Animal Pen 2 because this is the secondary design for an animal pen they have. You may recall the weird cow one that they have that's elevated back in our actual village. That's the Animal Pen 1 type, and I don't really care for it. So the only true animal pen that we're going to be keeping is this kind, which I say keeping, we'll have to build one, because we do not yet have one that is of this variety. So the two things that I'd like to point out about it are that the roofing is made out of trapdoors, which is just an aesthetic that I like, but also that while building this, they had plans that called for putting, I think, like torches on some of these posts, and this whole roof thing was not included at all, which would have meant that enough light was spilling out onto just immediately next to the fences that would have meant that there would have been some snow melting going on. So, I, as you can see over here, did a lot of calculating with what the deal is with light levels, and found that I was able to have lanterns at all these locations within it in order to provide enough light such that within this structure there will be no monster spawning. And, due to this one being right here, this water will not freeze. And yet, all the snow immediately around it also will not melt. That took a little bit of doing. To go ahead and move right on into the question of lighting, these lanterns once again provide a light level of 15 right on the actual block that they are. So then this block immediately below it and the block immediately to the side of it would both be light level 14, going down for every direct jump you make. And so what these carpet patterns on the floor are meant to represent is starting from 15, 14, 13. So any of these white carpets represent a light level of 13 going down. And the reason it stops at green is because that was also possibly all the colors of carpet I could get. No, I think there were some more. I stopped it there definitely because that's where light level 8 hits. And light level 8 is the minimum required to keep monsters from spawning. So the idea is going to be, and the idea of trying to figure out what distances I could play around with, was what that separation of lampposts I could get, so that I'm not, just putting lampposts every 2 spots, but I'm also not leaving, just random spots where within the walls creepers, zombies, and whatnot can spawn. And so what I've found from, given our positioning of along the fence line anyway, I'm planning on putting these lampposts one away from the fence line. I've found, as you can see here, that if I want to be able to cover these 2 spots with at least level 8, then this distance of, I believe, 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, yeah. So I can have 10 spaces in between each, and that'll actually put the direct ones at light level 9, but then 9 spills over this direction to be light level 8. Whereas if I had moved these apart even one further, then this square right here would be light level 8, but then it would be, this square here would only be light level 7, and it'd be a vulnerability. The other aspect of this is that with the idea of this spilling out over to here too, that would mean that hypothetically this would be clear, but then right here in the middle of the road you would have light level 7. So there is going to be, and that's part of what I was trying to work out with these ones that aren't right next to anything, and trying to see what some alternate lamppost designs would allow. So, for instance, these two are an interesting combination of going these two sideways, but then this one tries to sort of compensate. So instead of being double parallel, one is perpendicular so that that one lamp sort of slots right in to where the other one is. And I think this one's actually a little closer than I would need it, potentially. Yeah, I think I could have put this lamppost even one further, because then this yellow, which is coming from this lamppost, would put green there, and the blue would be right there, which would actually make that yellow. So actually, yeah, I could at least put this lamp one further, but that's obviously trying to get like just perfect cover, and I'm not going to use these for... I was using these to try to map out the numbers system, but once we're going to actually building, I'm just going to be trying to keep track of the numbers in my head, so that we make sure that lights are positioned, like I showed here, basically no further than 10 spaces away from another lantern being held 2 off the ground. Bearing in mind that the one caveat that is going to just sort of be an unfortunate necessity, snow melts at anything 11 or below. So from 11 to 8 prevents monsters, but it also will melt snow. No, strike that. And allows snow. Anything above it, so 12 and 13, because 15, 14, so yeah, the 12 and 13 will all be melted, which I don't think I can really get around. So there will be significant portions of no snow areas right around wherever these lampposts are, but it should still allow for a decent amount of snow coverage, which, I mean, I went to this, well, not here, but we're starting that map up in that biome because I like the look of the snow coverage. So, moving on to the houses, well, and before that, these other signs are, the DWH stands for depth, width, and then height. So, for the purposes of trying to plan out our road systems and where these buildings are going to be, I mapped out each of these completed buildings in terms of their dimensions so that if I, as I'm going to do, take down all of these onto some paper and then go back into our regular village, I can plot out where space will be for each of these and then, plan roads accordingly. So this one, 8 by 9 by 4, which is 8 deep from the road, 9 width across the road, and then 4 height up, which it technically doesn't even count as a full 4th block because of the little quarter block trapdoors, but I went ahead and counted that anyhow. So, here's one of our first job sites, the Armorer's Building. Ooh, I thought the thing was visible at the back. A lot of these buildings are going to have these chimney structures, and so they're another slight thing I wanted to kind of point out that will be significantly different from what you would see if you went to the wiki. The wiki designed these, or so not the wiki, but the wiki notes that Mojang designed these chimneys to be, I think, like 1 block shorter, to where they'll have this solid block only in the roof, and then you'll just have the single fence post. I felt I liked this idea of the whole block coming out, and then the fence post being on top of it, one looking just a little better, especially for these central ones, as you'll note. Well, okay, they're a little further down, but there's a couple more that we've got. Okay, actually, a lot of these are those side ones, but over here, yeah, we see another central one. I think that looks a lot better because it protrudes just a little bit more, and it's also a little more interesting on these side chimneys that they have on a lot of them, because if the fence post was only here, then technically, unless you're on that side of the building, you wouldn't even see that the building had a chimney, whereas, well, I mean, yeah, from the ground, you can sort of see it poking up, so it's not super prominent, but it makes the chimneys just that touch more prominent that I kind of like, and it's why I went with that change in design. So, other than that, to get into what they've actually got in here, normally, as per usual, their buildings almost always only call for 1 of these profession blocks, so in order to increase the efficiency, I've put in 2, and, as I mentioned, I have designed the building, well, I just changed how they planned the layout in order to make it be able to also function reasonably as a villager home for the two, ideally, for the two villagers who end up getting the armorer job. Another small note is that I've also placed, I think that this entire design is not unique to my design. I think that they had these fence posts with a lantern hanging off of it in the design of some of these buildings, but I definitely altered them because, bearing in mind our lighting issue, the ones in front aren't really what I'm getting at, but I put ones in the back because I don't think the plans called for them in the back, and I had to put them at this level so that they would be symmetrical on both sides, and more the entire purpose, so that the ones in the back are 15 on the block, 14, 13, 12, 11, doesn't melt the snow immediately below it. And then 11, 10, 9, 8. So then, provides a small triangle out back of it where monsters can't spawn without even needing lampposts. And so part of how lighting, not like I said, with the fence area, it's going to just be, basically every 10 paces. It's going to need another lamppost. But for lighting the rest of the area, I tried to put lamps on the backs of, as you can see from here, most of these places so that there will be some coverage of the lights of the building being able to provide the area around them with a little bit of light so that they're not monster danger areas, but I didn't really do any of that with the sides, so we will still have to find some creative places to put lampposts to make sure that in between buildings and so forth, monsters can't spawn. And I realize there is potentially some issue with, like, the rooftops. I'm not totally sure how I want to handle that. I may go ahead and leave the rooftops be. I don't know. We'll have to think about it, because the issue is if I light the rooftops in order to make sure that they have a light level that'll protect them, unfortunately that's also almost certainly going to remove the snow cover, which, again, I really like, so issues. One other small note that I'm going to make while I'm here on the sides of the buildings, this siding and the way that these blocks are like, full block, half block, so forth and so on. Not every building had that originally. Several of them were just solidly full blocks. But I liked that aesthetic on the couple of ones that they did have it on, and so I went ahead and made that a lot more unanimous. So now pretty much every one of these buildings has this sort of alternating pattern on its lowest portion and then has some form of uniformity up here on the top. Although there's some really weird buildings that are down that way that have roof structures that they called for and I went ahead and kept. Some really weird up and downs on the roof. But moving on to this next one, this one's the butcher shop. So something that was uniquely problematic about this one is that they use these I've seen in one or two other biomes that for these butcher shops they have these depressed areas and then a raised area of stone, which I guess is supposed to be like the slaughtering block for the pigs before they then put them into the smokers. And because I tried a few configurations of trying to figure out how I could have that in here and not take up all the room like it is still doing, and this was honestly still the best configuration I could come up with without removing that element entirely, which I didn't want to do. So unfortunately, this is one of the few profession buildings I just could not figure a way to have the beds be in here. So this is one of the profession buildings that will not be able to house its own workers. I saw that there's, I think in the Plains Village there were a couple of times when they would use these trapdoors as shelving, so I've also used that in a couple of these places you might notice as shelving in order to have some chests in areas. And then also, originally the butcher shop is one of the few. So the butcher shop actually is one of the few that originally came designed to, not have that roof thing that I've added, but it did come designed with this paddock in back for the animals to be used, conceptually at least, to be used with the profession. I went ahead and for the tanner, which uses leather from cows, I went ahead and added on to the back of that one a similar paddock for cows, and the Fletcher, which uses feathers, I added one for chickens. which I believe covers the 3. Oh, and then the sheep, or the building, or the block is the loom. The building and profession is the tailor? I think it's the tailor building. That one uses wool, and that one, also similar to this butcher one, already came designed with a sheep pen. So now all of those animal types won't need a secondary animal pen, which is why this is the one that was, of the two, is the one that was most suited to horses. So it's the one I kept for horses, because we shouldn't need any other freestanding animal pens, because I've built them right into their profession buildings. I think this is our first. Oh, nope, this is the cartographer, and this one you may recognize from the actual cartographer we have, and it's not that different. Mostly I just added a bed there, and then instead of leaving that side sort of empty and weird, I just duplicated things so that, you know, 2 cartographers can live at the place and can work there. So now we come to the 2 different forms of farming. As you can see, neither of these is the snow type that we built at the front of the village. Once I had built the whole thing out, I realized that there was like that one farm type that was mostly meant to have snow borders, and there was only really like 2 or 3 buildings that are meant to have snow as their building block, and there were a couple that were meant to have ice, which we weren't going to be working with that no matter what. So I went ahead and made a decision that I'm not actually going to build more than, I think I may have left 1. Oh, no, actually it looks like, yes, I did eventually then decide even that there was 1 residential snow building that I was thinking about keeping, but clearly, as we didn't see it, no, I decided eventually that we will only be using these ones that are made out of wood. That way it gives the whole village more of a consistent aesthetic, as well as it'll simplify the building materials that I need for everything. Which also means that this one is going to most similarly look to the one that's way in the back of the village, and the one that we already built in the back of the village already does look mostly like this. The alterations I made to it, I made to this, and then added mostly, I think, just this fencing around it, and then the 2 gates. Otherwise, I think this is basically what we had already adapted it to look like. But then this is a completely whole cloth, my invention of, I mean, I don't want to take, I'm just saying, I didn't adapt this one particularly from the wiki. I just wanted a much larger potential farm, because while this one is still larger than either of the ones that they were planning, I wanted some opportunity for designing a much bigger one, and so this one, I don't know if we'll actually find a particular need to fit it in. This is big enough that I felt it could afford having 2 farmers work on it, but well, as you can see from the dimensions here, it's 13 by 11, so this would take up a lot of space when we could just be fitting in these little, like, yes, basically 7 by 7. It'd be 7 by 7 if we didn't have the staircases, but I'm keeping the staircases, so it is 8 by 7. And we've got some of the buildings down the way that are going to be taking up enough room that, and will have priority over a large farm, that we may end up not actually using this design, which is also kind of fine by me because it's a little more extravagant than I really wanted to go, and I do like the design of this one. And I also went ahead and gave this one a name, Scorpion Farm, because, well, I think you can see why. And then this one was Fountain Farm, because, again, I think you could see why. But, aside from that, next we have the Fisher's Hut, which comes both with this little area for them to hypothetically do fishing. I don't know if they actually do any of that, because their profession block is actually these barrels. So I don't know that they actually do anything all day. But I also altered, and you can see the use of these shelving again in order to give them room for storage, and then beds within their fisher's hut. So, and then once again, they didn't have this little awning-like thing with the trapdoors. That's, again, something that I added because I liked it, and now I've got that in most any place that would otherwise require some sort of covering. So it does create, again, a more consistent aesthetic. And then you can already hear the chickens behind the Fletcher's house here, and once again you can see that I've mostly just taken what they already designed and duplicated it. With this much headspace, I could probably have gotten better use out of moving these crates up onto shelving. So I'm still not totally determined that I won't be potentially manipulating things further, but for the most part, I'm happy with where most of these buildings are. Let's see, this is the library. I do quite a bit of alteration to this one. So, for the first place, I believe originally this is just a one-story building. It is, in the blueprints, significantly tall, and I think maybe even close to this tall, but I don't think they use their loft really at all. And so I made it to where now, unfortunately, due to the way that I've constructed it, you can't really use this bottom floor that much, but it does have all the books, so it has all the look of being a library with a whole bunch of books on the base floor, and when you go up, we do still have 2 of these lecterns such that we can have 2 librarians. And then, some more books up here. And you may be noticing these trapdoors here. These are here in order to not have a hole in the ground, and such that I could use these lanterns here indented up into the ceiling, because if I place them down, then you wouldn't be able to get in there, which probably wouldn't be an issue. I mean, here we just would have ended up having to not go with the light, because it would otherwise block you. So this design I'm certainly okay with. It's another one of those where I might go back on it and just say, you know what, go ahead and just have the lantern be at head level and only be able to conceptually access the books from here in the lane, Let's see, which one is this? This is the mason's house, so this has the stone cutters and a furnace for firing clay. Not just a ton else to say about this one. Well, an interesting side note is that this one has this weird, you'll notice the floor is all the way up here at 2 off the ground. This is the only building that called for that. Every other building called for just the base ground, and there was a mason's house too that was more like everything else, but it was also significantly smaller, and this was the one that could fit double, so I went ahead and kept it with its rather interesting design. And never mind, that's not the one I was thinking of. One of these is going to have an interesting design on the back that I started copying, which didn't exist yet. So you'll notice a lot of these have this stripped wood, and that's sort of an overall construction note. I did find what the formula is for that just stripped wood. Well, here, let me go and open the creative inventory to point at what I'm looking at. So here's stripped spruce logs, here's stripped spruce wood. And you'll note the main difference is that these logs still have the one face, well, it'll have the 2 faces that have the log texture. It's just the bark textures have that stripped look. Whereas wood, all 6 sides have the stripped bark look. Turns out the way that you attain these stripped spruce blocks is by making what I think should show up in here, which is non-stripped, just spruce blocks. Here we go, yeah, spruce wood. So, and then we're spruce logs. So this is the progression. So, when you just cut down a spruce tree, the wood you get looks like this. And if you place it and then right-click with an axe, you'll turn it into stripped spruce logs. In order to get stripped spruce wood, you have to turn your spruce logs into spruce wood, which, let's see, if I'm remembering the formula correctly, let's just grab a bunch, I should be able to do, oh, I don't have that inventory in here. 1 second. Is it under decoration? Yes. Let's go ahead and plop this down on the other side of the road right quick. So if we take, I believe it was 3 spruce logs? 4? There it is. There's right there's the issue. So you take 4 spruce logs and it makes 3 spruce wood. So the cost of doing this transaction is one of those spruce logs goes away just to make this design difference for spruce wood, because that is literally all the difference is for spruce wood. I mean, maybe it has a different blast reduction or something, but I don't care about that. It's just the design difference. And so you'll make that transaction, then you place them and use the axe right-click on them in order to make them strip spruce wood. The issue with that, to me, is that doesn't matter for pretty much any of the instances where they called for it, because almost all the instances where they called for stripped spruce wood was walls. Walls which, mind you, are only going to be seen from two faces. Because below them, above them, and to either side, unless they're on a corner, admittedly, you're going to have other blocks. Meaning, if you place the log sideways to where the two open faces are facing other wall blocks, you'll have no way of knowing it wasn't that. So, in every one of these cases, I just didn't even bother with using spruce, stripped spruce wood. So all these are just made with stripped spruce logs, which again is not one extra log per block, which would just be, or well, per 3, but still, that touch of efficiency I was refusing to part with. And then I think this is our first, this is our first residential, which is itself also a 2-story. And this one, on the other hand, unlike the library, actually was always intended as a 2-story. And a lot of these have weird things with the lanterns here, because they technically called for torches, but because of how many lanterns I was using with so much of it, I kind of wanted to, again, establish more of a consistent aesthetic, and part of that meant keeping a lot more of it lamp-lit rather than torch-lit. And as you can see with this building, we actually have enough room for 4 people. Which, considering our profession buildings, by and large, are going to be able to supply regular people, there should be relatively little need for a whole bunch of just residential houses, because we don't need just a whole bunch of non-tradable, what is the term, jester villagers? No, that's not it. Whatever they are. So, this is effectively a direct recreation of what the regular Meeting Place 3 type is. Unaltered, and not what I plan on going with, but I have it here so that you can see how I took their baseline plan for what we already had in our village, and sort of, well, as you can see, went a little bit overboard and probably a bit crazy. But this is now a Meeting Place 4 that has, as you can see, once again, that sort of awning style thing over it. It's tall enough such that, I think this bell is the only part that isn't at least 4 high, such that golems could walk all through this without any problem, except for right here in the middle. The bell is still at the exact same height, so if the villagers were able to ring it before, they can ring it still. So forth and so on. So that's more or less my new plan for the meeting area. This is the shepherd's house, so as you can see, this one, once again, already came with a sheep pen, although, once again, I also added this little awning portion. And I duplicated the looms such that 2 of them can work here, and this is another of the ones that wasn't really able to fit. We're going to see 1 or 2 more that were like this, which is why we're going to definitely be able to make use of like that medium house, and I think we have a small house coming up a little bit down the line that'll be interesting to see where we can fit them. Right here! Here's the small house. So, because this is a distinctly small house, I went ahead and just let this one be a single bunk. There was one alternate design that I think, I didn't keep because I didn't like, but, so that's the small house, and this is the tannery that originally, here's what's really interesting, originally it called for this to be in the middle of the building like this, and to have a stone block here. I don't know what that was about, and it was closed off, but I went ahead and just knocked that stone block out, and bada bing! You have room for a cow pen. And I actually went ahead and copied this little bit from that Animal Pen 1, I think it was, which you may recognize from the cow pen that we actually have in the village at the moment. And their profession block is the cauldron. Let's see. This one's the temple. Alright, this one was the only building that I just completely overhauled while still trying to keep a lot of the original hallmarks, I guess I'll go with. So, for instance, this weird little protrusion on top, that was not me. This is almost directly copied in its style from the original design, but having 2 floors, being quite this wide, and I think even quite this long. I think I've built it out in both the width and depth, and height. So I expanded it significantly in order to fit all the things I wanted. Which here on the base floor include these seats and the concept of a podium more than an actual one, because if I put a actual podium there, then it would suddenly turn this bottom floor into a library because of the way that those work. So again, it's more for the thought of it. And upstairs is room for, okay, I'm not totally sure why I put 3. But the building is big enough, definitely, to support 3 of the priests, which isn't bad. And we've got plenty of storage up here as well. And then a trapdoor to keep, because apparently the villagers are... How did I phase right through that? Villagers are apparently unable to use trapdoors, which means that if you put a trapdoor over something like this, they won't be able to get up here and then get stuck or anything. And that exact principle is, I think, what we're going to end up utilizing at where my tunnel enters the village. Instead of bothering with some sort of big fancy building, I think we're just going to put a trapdoor on top, and then I'll just have to make sure I always remember to close it whenever I come or go. And then I also went ahead and put gates here so that you can access the roof if you want to. Which is, again, explicitly just going to be me, because with the trapdoor, the villagers should have no access up there anyway. Let's see, and then this one's the toolsmith. So this one's another one that I was able to make it to where they have 2 of these, but they designed it to be really cramped in here. So this will also be one that requires its villagers to have a home elsewhere. And this is one of the ones where, as you can see here up on top of it, and I guess I actually also borrowed some of the other ideas to make the church one a lot weirder too, or temple as they called it. But even just by comparison to that, this one, I did not alter how this roof works. I don't think. Not particularly, anyway. So this checkerboard pattern is, by and large, how they designed it, which is weird because that's pretty noticeable as a pattern, and none of the other buildings really have that, like across the whole thing, as this checkerboard style. I could, to create more unanimity with the other buildings, probably only have this thing on the temple and then make all of these. Well, I guess I would need for the... Alright, so I mean, again, there's still potentially some more slight alterations I might make to some of these buildings. And then this last one is the blacksmith. Well, or armor smith. With a repair and disenchant style grinder, another grinder, and an anvil, because these 2 being here means that it'll be room for 2 of their profession, because these are their actual profession blocks, but then you want an anvil at one of them because you just want to have access to anvils for naming stuff, you know? And then also furnaces, chests, and then this disposal lava area, which ironically, this block right here and the thing covering it, yeah, those are actually additions by me. Their design actually calls for that to just be open air, which feels like a bad idea with villagers, if you know what I mean. So, by and large, that is what I have designed and discovered. So I think we are mostly ready then to take a lot of these ideas and lessons and go apply them in the main map. So that will be what we will be well, okay, so the first thing we'll be spending the next episode doing is getting a lot of the fence area properly lit up, following the lessons of the 10 spacing and whatnot. Then I'll be using these height or depth with height measurements to try to plot out where we're going to be putting various buildings, and then we'll primarily focus on just getting the roads in once I've gotten those spaced out. Because another thing I'll need to do on this map before I can really proceed with the other one is A, finalize some of these designs that I'm still a little iffy on, but also try to figure out what all the materials are for each of these buildings, because ideally I'm going to want to, as directly as possible, recreate them. And to do that, not in creative mode on the regular map, I'm going to need to know how much of whatever I'm going to need. And then I will also just have these here as effective blueprints for remembering how I build them. So, thanks for watching, and we will catch you next time. Yo, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, like and leave a comment. Subscribe and hit the bell icon if you want YouTube to let you know when more uploads arrive. I've put links in the description for if you want to follow the channel's Twitter or Facebook, as well as a link to the channel's Patreon if you'd like to support the channel. Once again, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.